Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Raymond, and I'm the conference manager for the Seamless Asia Pacific series. Through our events and webinar, we bring together the leader of e-commerce, payments, and banking to discover what the future holds for the industry. Coming up in this afternoon session, we will be covering an interesting topic of buy now, pay later, optimizing collections to mitigate risks. We are delighted to have AI Reader on board as sponsor for today's webinar, and we have brought together a fantastic panel who will each bring a different perspective, and we are delighted to welcome Tom Blackman as the moderator for today's session. Tom is an accomplished business leader with a talent for growing and scaling organization and helping his team quickly to achieve strong business results. In his role, Tom oversees AI Reader's sales and customer success team to deliver excellent advice and service for clients. And over the course of his professional career, he has held a variety of strategy and operational revenue driving roles from some of the most prominent startups to establish multinational operations, including serving as the regional VP of deal strategy for a multinational CRM company, as well as leading sales, account management, and business development teams across the Asia region. With over decades of experience in customer service, process improvement, and training, Tom has become an authority in customer experience space and often speaks at prominent CX events. And I would like to thank each of our speakers for spending the time to join us this afternoon. But before I pass over to Tom, I would like to run a few housekeeping points. Firstly, please submit any of your questions for the panel through the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen, and there will be some time located towards the end of the session for live Q&A. And secondly, we will have a feedback survey that will pop up in your browser at the end of the session. So please share any of the feedback or questions that you'd like us to cover in the future. If we hear back from you, that'd be great. And right now, without further ado, I would like to pass over to our moderator, Tom, to take it away. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone for joining. Thank you for the introduction there. Yep, thank you. I work for AI Rudder. Been here about 6 months and working with lots of companies across the region and globally to help them with their AI voice solutions. We do a lot of work with customers in the BNPL space, hence why we're part of this panel today. Can I ask all the guests on the panel to come online with their videos? And if we can just quickly go around each of you and you can give yourself an introduction. I can go with who I can see first. So Arvin, if you'd like to introduce yourself, your company and where you work, and your role in the company, and we can go from there.
Excellent. Thanks, Tom. And thanks for having us as part of the event as well. Arvin Singh, co-founder at Hula, recently acquired by Shopback and now part of the Shopback group as we build out financial services arm of Shopback going forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Perry, you're next in my view.
Yes, hello. Hi, everyone. So my name is Perry Brown, Pandey, and I am the senior CRM and also campaign manager for Raleigh.com. So I'm responsible for handling the campaigns that we're going to come up with, and also how to handle the CRM's metrics here in our company. And probably just a brief introduction about Raleigh. So we are a B2B e-commerce platform that connects businesses across Indonesia to fulfill their business needs, and also in order to give them access to the market through our digital platform. And also at the same time, we are also creating a supportive business ecosystem throughout Indonesia. So yeah, I think pretty much that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. And Sonal, you're next on my list. Oh, you're on mute, Sonal.
Hi, I think it's better now. Hi, everyone. This is Sonal. It's great to be here. I lead financial services for a company called Flipkart. It is India's largest e-commerce platform. And we focus on providing payments and financial services such as buy now, pay later, and other type of loan and insurance products to our consumers to drive affordability and inclusion. So that's what I do.
Thank you so much. And Lala.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Lala. I lead product for consumer lending at DBS, and we currently have presence in 6 markets: Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, India, Indonesia, and China. I know in terms of buy now, pay later, DBS may not be the first name that comes to mind, but we're actually pretty entrenched in this space. On top of offering traditional installment products on our cards, we've also partnered with many fast-growing fintechs like Shopee and Credible to fund their BNPL loans.
Great, and thanks. You mentioned 2 of our great customers there as well that use the solution as well as part of their buy now, pay later strategies. So, I mean, before I kick off in the questions, of course, we all know that this is a very varied space in the region that has definitely taken off in the last couple of years. It was always around and something that was going on, and I think it became even more prevalent over the last 2 years throughout this pandemic. We've got a varying degree of questions that we want to go through today and hear from you all and learn from you. Just to kick it off, just to get some general idea of what you see within payments and buy now, pay later, maybe your perspective on what you see as the regional payment space and how you see it evolving over time at the moment. Perhaps we start with Sonal.
Sure, I think, thank you for that question, Tom. And I think just to again lay a little bit of a context, I think India as a country is sort of operating on a slightly different domain as compared to the rest of the countries in Southeast Asia and the region, right? I think we are low entrenched on card payments. The card penetration in the country is still going to be about less than 5%. But at the same time, what has happened is that thanks to some of the key innovations that have been made in the country, right, on the back of UPI, which allows customers to just scan a QR code and make the payment real time, essentially transfer of money from either P2P or P2M in a fraction of a second, right? I think that has changed the landscape for us in the country multitudinally, right? Today, a lot of digital payments, in fact, currently in the country, I think about 70% of the digital payments are made by UPI, and it's just a period of 4 years, right? So that's the type of journey that we've seen. So I think what's really happening in the country is that there is this entire ecosystem of digital payments which is being built between fintechs, merchants, banks, right? Which is essentially riding on majorly on UPI-led, right, which is digital payment ecosystem and newly developed within India currently. And it is obviously then at the later date powered by cards. What we are seeing now, at least in the last 9 to 12 months, is the loading of credit, right? And credit was always well versed within the country, but I think loading of credit in a completely different form and shape, right? So for instance, buy now pay later has really picked up. In the online merchants, the buy now pay later penetration has grown up to 10 to 15% in certain cases, right? Especially in metro or top cities and high affluent customers. So that seems to be really catching up. Installments on card is another popular feature that is coming up again massively, right? And especially for a country like India, where the disposable incomes are not on an extremely high rise, but are sort of, in a median range as if you compare it to the overall region. What's really happening is that that's another feature that's picking up, right? So it's almost like you're moving towards a digital ecosystem, and lending in a way is helping drive the economy further, fueling the economy further. So that's going pretty well for us overall.
Thank you. And I think you do mention, of course, that yes, India is very different, but there are such huge similarities as well with certain parts of the region. That's why I love this region too. There's so much variance from country to country. Like Singapore operates so differently from Indonesia to the Philippines to Thailand to India to Australia. And that we see that come up, which is why it's great to have people here from all over with people there as well. If I go from kind of the e-commerce space, Lala, perhaps I can get your perspective on what you're seeing from the more banking space and what you're seeing as the change in the payment space at the moment.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with what Sonal said in terms of the journeys of credit and payments coming together. And we see this whole theme of embedded finance really coming up in both e-commerce checkout journeys and as well as offline purchase journeys. Now, as a consumer, you can pay and borrow in one single step. You don't even realize that you're actually taking on credit, right, when you're taking a BNPL product. At DBS, what we saw particularly in the last 2 years that even though some of the spends have come down because of the pandemic, our BNPL, the demand for BNPL and for installment payments have actually risen. Customers are not only taking it at checkout, but also post-checkout. So there's a feature where you can actually convert your entire credit card statement post-transaction after you receive it to checkout. And that helps to ease some of the customer cash flows and all that. And at the same time, we do see people who actually engage regularly on an installment product become even more engaged on their card spends and card payment products. So I believe that BNPL is definitely a trend here to stay, and especially in emerging markets like Indonesia and India. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And maybe I take it back to e-commerce section before coming back to Arvin. Perry, do you have any thoughts you wanted to share on that question?
Yeah, I'm also pretty much agree with what Lala and also so I just mentioned, especially that's coming from a country that there's pretty much like a similar population as India, because Indonesia has a very very big large population. And I think when it comes to the Repayment in Indonesia itself, I think it grew like so much fast. I mean, especially in the pandemic area. Yeah, I actually don't want to say that thanks to the pandemic, of course, no, because I think there are some sort of like a bright side of pandemic that we can actually see. That I think a couple of industries, they must take an innovation, to ensure that the payment are actually still safe enough, and also within safe proximity. So I think it evolves so much, and I can see some of the government here, like let's say like for Indonesia itself, I think they're pretty much take this like a very serious thing. So I think the development for like tech infrastructure has already been taken care of and already in place, and they've also like planned for like next 5 to 10 years to further develop the tech infrastructure in Indonesia. So I think this is some sort of like a good thing that we can actually see, during the pandemic.
Can I ask something specific? You work in a marketplace, right? So it's different when it's your own inventory, your own everything, your own e-commerce platform. But when working in a marketplace, how do you see payments? Because of course you're then needing to transfer payments into vendors. You've got that whole thing there. How do you confirm when deliveries have happened? That sort of confirmation there. Do you see added complexity, do you think, because you're a marketplace and needing to, because of course, handle payments in both directions as well? So you're taking the payments from the people buying on your store, but then you've got a second side of your payment section there as well when those transactions are made, right?
Yeah, sure. I think this is also a great benefit for us because, again, that we are a B2B e-commerce platform. So the market is actually kind of niche, which is kind of like different with like the other B2C players like a Lazada or Shopee, because we are catering those who are in the business sphere. Yeah. And of course, the need is also going to be different, right? And I think when it comes to BNPL, this is also a very good product that we can actually apply, because some of the business here, they're still working on their cash flow, right? Because they actually need to manage their cash flow as good as possible. So that's why the BNPL can jump in and then also can provide a solution to each of the business.
Thank you. And Arvin, perhaps without, of course, speaking from your opinion versus speaking about your roadmap, because I'm sure that me asking you what you're seeing in the space and evolving will, it'll sound like I'm asking you for your roadmap. I'm not asking for your roadmap, but more, what are you seeing as personally, Arvin, in the development of the space in payments at the moment?
Yeah, no, I think the last couple of years has been really interesting watching, I think, an anticipated growth that we were looking at for a long time in e-commerce actually start to come to fruition, especially in Southeast Asia. I think being here and being a part of it and seeing the numbers and experiencing the numbers as we grew through that process as well was quite fascinating. I think a lot of the predictions that were made a few years ago about the 10-year growth, we kind of achieved those numbers through the pandemic. I think one of the things that I'm looking at and of course trying to hypothesize around is how retail returns, physical retail, as we reopen. And as of yesterday, Singapore, for example, a lot of reopening happening and changes to post-COVID rules, how that impacts just shopping as an activity across the region, in a part of the world where physical retail shopping has been a mainstay and continues to be. E-commerce has put a bit of a dent in that, but will we see a massive spike back in a physical retail environment? Will it be more about customer acquisition and transferring those customers into digital? I think there's a clear view that being a payment provider or being part of that shopping journey, we need to exist everywhere where a customer wants to be, regardless of what that choice looks like, because it might be a weekend in the mall, and it might be a Wednesday night online on a mobile device. So it's not really mind-blowing in terms of trends or what evolution looks like. I think it's just a realization of a lot of predictions that were made a few years ago.
I think you're right. I think in the space that I've been working in and around for the last few years, the discussion's always been, how do we take offline to online? And then we didn't have a choice in that 2 years ago, and everything had to go online. Now it's about, to your point, how do we get that now online experience that everyone's used to and bring that to offline? And how do we keep that hybrid, like hybrid working? Well, how do we deal with hybrid customers who might, like you said, order something on Wednesday night and then go into the store on Saturday? How are they going to have the same experience? Are they going to have the same options to pay? Can they now go into a high street store and choose a BNPL option? What do they have as options there on these smaller transactions? So it's a great point you make. Thank you.
Actually, just on that point, a question or a conversation that started with a lot of the merchants that we work with in that retail environment is, should we have a consistent experience on online and offline, or should there be a really differentiated customer experience based on the channel, because it's more fit for that channel and you can do a few more things? And that's been some of the conversations that, I'm here in Malaysia at the moment, just doing a lot of face-to-face meetings with retailers. And that's been a really interesting observation from them on how to optimize channels rather than just throwing the word omni-channel out there and saying it needs to work the same way. So that's been a good eye-opening takeaway from the meetings I've been having here.
Thanks. And yeah, you raised another point, which maybe isn't necessarily related to this topic, but it's relevant to what you just said, which is, throwing the word omni-channel out there. I've heard it's been such a trendy word to use over the last few years, but I like to challenge people and go, I think it's more multi-channel than omni-channel sometimes, and realizing that you can't be the same everywhere you are. None of us are. No people are your customers, act differently. So to that point, you do have a point there that people are discussing, does it need to be the same, or can it be varied and nuanced as well based on what works there for the difference in experience? That leads nicely into what was the second question, around kind of how the pandemic has affected the payments business, how it has maybe, or your business specifically, and what do you think that has changed other than it's driven us to do things faster? And then how have you managed that? So not just looking for you to share your points around what has changed, but also to learn a little bit about how that was managed in your business. Sonal, if I can start with you again, that would be great. Sorry, I realized I didn't mean to choose you again the first time. I'll make sure to move you down next time.
Okay, then that's great. But nevertheless, right? I think, COVID was a hard time, right? And especially again, in economies that are highly cash dependent. Now suddenly, consumers were wary of handing out the cash because they were worried about getting infected. So the idea was that they never wanted to come in touch with somebody who's even dropping off any of the stuff at their home, right? So I think what we did see, and I think we still continue to see the trend somewhat even today, is that we saw a high uptake in the digital payments or prepaid transactions, as we call it in e-commerce parlance, right? So I think from an overall perspective, I think at a given point in time when COVID was at its peak, we saw actually about a 30% jump in a 7 days time in the number of prepaid transactions that we do on the platform, right? Because people were just figuring out what is the best way to pay and not come. So what we actually saw is, the barrier in terms of using digital payments for the first time has definitely come down, right? So it's sort of acted as in the favor of digital payments, really, in a way, if you look at it, right? I think some of the challenges that we did face is that, and I think luckily we were, because of, again, the e-commerce, the way e-commerce functions, especially in India and maybe, in some part of other countries, right? That the payment infrastructure is somewhat solid. I think it's much more broken on the offline side. Online, I think, because of the perspective, it's a tech platform. I think we've all done a better job on that one. So we saw that there were obviously issues in terms of quick, fast settlements, right? Because some of the rails were broken and had to be sort of managed and worked upon to ensure that the speed could be managed well, right? And when I say speed, I mean speed of the transaction, ability of the systems to handle a large volume suddenly, right, in a short period of time. So I think some of those basic hygiene factors sort of had to be worked upon. And of course, they sort of, there was a journey towards that. But overall, as an e-commerce player, I think we have seen that digital payments, consumers who moved to digital payments at that point in time, right, of course, continue to have a much more retention and a repeat behavior on the platform. So it's actually sort of like a virtual cycle and has worked well, right? I think the other thing that we saw interestingly is, and it's sort of a dilemma, because I think it goes back to what Lala was saying in the beginning, right? A lot of consumers don't realize that buy now, pay later is credit. So we saw a lot of transactions picking up on buy now, pay later. Obviously, we saw a lot of high risk guardrails also going up because of just the environment that we were living in. At the same time, surprisingly, what we also saw, and maybe this is just specific to a certain part of the geography, we saw a large part of consumer loans, right, which is high ticket size loans, literally coming down, right, and not just because of the risk tightening from the lenders, but literally from the consumers, because I think everybody was holding on to their purchases in a certain way unless required, right? So it was sort of a slight change in consumer behavior. People were more willing to buy an exercise machine on credit, which is buy now, pay later, but not suddenly willing to buy a new television or a new mobile phone on credit at all, right? So I think there's been obviously that change in the consumer behavior that we continue to see, and credit behavior, credit utilization behavior for sure. So that's what we've been noticing.
Thanks, and I think you struck a point there that, and Lala as well, about people not realizing they're taking out credit. It's funny how when you name something differently, people behave differently with it, right? We've always lived in this world of, a credit card is buy now, pay later. That is essentially what it is, and so there's such a stigma around that, specifically in region as well, where people don't have access to credit scoring and getting that ability there. So you both make a great point. Arvin, if I can come back to you on this one as well, if that's okay, and talk us through some of your, how the pandemic shifted things for you. I think you touched a little bit on it earlier, but if there's anything else you wanted to add now.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing that changed was what people were buying through that period as well. It's always fun to look through and understand shopping habits and behavior as it changes, especially the early days of the pandemic, seeing folks getting a lot of work from home setup gear, like desks and chairs and everything else that's needed to have a really good work from home setup. That was great. And as we kind of get to the tail end of this, hopefully, knock on wood, all that stuff, we've recently launched with Malaysian Airlines, and that's been an interesting shift of what habits look like for customers as well. So we've seen that period in the pandemic where it was the coffee makers and the office chairs and things like that at home, as people made their homes more comfortable as well for that long ride that we had. But we start to see that shift now as folks look to travel a bit more and get back out and get socializing again. Those habits are changing. We didn't see any significant change in terms of like repayment ability or things like that. I don't think that there was a significant shift in our customer behavior from that standpoint. And I think, to be a little controversial, throw it out there, our customer behavior is certainly different from a traditional credit solution. And I know there's always comparisons that can be drawn, but we actually don't predicate the business or really drive revenue off of a late payment position. So we're really incentivized to get customers to pay on time. Like, that's our core business, because we actually do better from a P&L standpoint when folks pay on time. So there's this massive motivation for us internally to really get that, because it creates the right behavior, it gets customers going, and it likely drives a good repeat behavior as well with the customer if they can get that payment on time. So there's a slightly different, I would say, philosophy, mindset, or approach to even the solution that does differentiate from credit a bit. And I think that's probably why we didn't see any significant impact through the pandemic period on the repayments.
Yeah, no one likes getting a phone call to say they've not done something. So you're right. It drives a different behavior. People don't feel like they'll be in trouble for doing something they did before. If they have a positive experience with going through with it, then they're more likely, I guess, to return. Lala, what have you seen from a banking perspective? I know DBS has made a lot of strides into becoming a much more digital bank over a long period of time. You've been kind of driving that initiative for a while. So I'd be interested to see if anything did change in the business space for you as DBS.
I actually wanted to add a different sort of perspective besides the whole purchase behavior and spending, right? I think the pandemic was actually quite a difficult time for a lot of our customers, especially in the credit space in countries like Indonesia. In fact, a lot of customers actually lost their jobs. They could not make that even smaller payments on time. These were people working in restaurants, in hotel sectors, which were really badly hit, right? So we actually did a lot of proactive management of risk during that time in terms of offering payment holidays, tenor extensions for credit products to make sure that we help our customers through this difficult time. And obviously, as Sonal and Arvin mentioned, we did see shifts in spending behavior from like bigger ticket to smaller ticket. A lot of people moving on digital payments who were not on it before. So that's quite similar, I think, across all institutions. Yeah.
Thank you. And Perry, maybe if I can go to you on the next question, unless you had anything to add on the last one about how the pandemic changed, but I was thinking about jumping forward. Do you have anything to add on the last question?
Yeah, sure. I think on that note, I think us as a company of a B2B e-commerce, I think it was all rough at the very beginning. I think like a lot rougher, I guess. I think as of us here have experienced, but yeah. Well, we can see like the end of 2021 when the pandemic started to wear down, and then we can eventually start to manage to bounce back. And also I think how have we managed is that I think we keep trying to innovate to see that if there's any better opportunity that we can take us as a e-commerce. I think with a couple of innovations that we've taken, in terms of payments, in Rawali.com, we have this digital good payment. So we actually facilitate all of the business users, or the person from general affair or from procurement, if they want to pay, like say, let's say like their electricity, or if they want to pay their phone bills, or if they want to, let's say, their social security card or BPJS, so they can actually have like this feature that we created. It's called One Billing, so they can actually pay it all under one system. So that actually can enable them and also make them make the process easier for them to do the online transaction for all of those business needs and also operation. And also the other thing that we keep doing is also acquiring some of the private brands. I think that is also something that could elevate the online transactions that we have. So we purchase something that revolves around F&B. So we actually just supply it to other e-commerce platforms. So that way that we can actually gain more revenue throughout this endemic area season. Yeah. So I think yes, I think to keep doing innovation and how to keep the business stay afloat is something that we need to be doing in this pandemic. Yeah.
I'm going to jump to another question, as I think we've covered a lot about some of the challenges that we've all faced and things we've gone through. What benefits do we see from implementing BNPL? I think we all know we've touched on some of it, but from a business perspective and from your customers' perspective, when we think about the customer experience, what benefits are there from implementing BNPL, and what challenges do we think the audience should keep in mind if they're considering implementing BNPL? I'm sure Arvin's desperate to answer, but I want to go to Lala first because I've kept her quiet for most of it. So I'll go to Lala for the first response to that one, if you've got any opinions on this one.
Yeah, so I think from a merchant perspective, BNPL definitely helps to, I think our Arvin would know, increase the number of sales, the basket conversions, right? It allows customers to have an alternative payment method. From a banking perspective, actually, we see a lot of people taking BNPL, even though they have a credit card or their credit card segment. It allows them to manage their finances in a different way. It's a new innovation that's out there that's at checkout, and it's just so easy for them to do. Yeah, so those are the main benefits that we see from both a bank and a merchant perspective.
Thanks. Sonal, were you raising your hand then?
No, but I will now.
Okay, sorry. I saw your hand up, so I thought you were saying I want to go next. So.
No, I was sort of just no, but I think yeah, I think buy now pay later, of course, has literally done wonders in terms of retaining customers and consumer experiences, right? So and at Flipkart, what we do is we actually operate our own Flipkart Pay Later product, right? So we are literally the lender, the buy now pay later provider, and then an e-commerce platform as well, right? So of course, what has happened because of that is that we've been able to tie the consumer journey on the platform, right? Using the word embedded once again in a much more tighter manner and a much more seamless manner, right? But what we increasingly see is that consumers who are buy now pay later users or repeat credit users for that matter, right? Their transactions on the platform are much higher, right? So if I were to just compare two consumers very alike, one using buy now pay later, one not using buy now pay later, the one using buy now pay later will maybe spend about 30% extra on the platform over a period of 6 months, will make additional few transactions on the platform in a period of 6 months in comparison, right? So obviously from a platform health perspective, buy now pay later is doing great, right? But I think there are also other metrics, right? For instance, the engagement on the platform, right? Or the retention on the platform, the time spent on the platform continue to increase because now the consumer is thinking of Flipkart not just as a platform where you come and purchase, but hey, you also have my pay later account with you, right? So the number of times the consumer is just coming to the platform has also increased therefore, right? So there are some of the objective calls and there are some of the subjective calls that we are seeing, but I think at an overall level, it's definitely a net positive impact on the platform.
Thanks for sharing some of those statistics. It's really interesting to know. Of course, when things are broken down into small pieces, it makes everything better. There's it's very much why these sorts of corner stores exist in India, Indonesia, Philippines, where you can go and buy shampoo in sachets versus buying a whole bottle. This whole thing kind of exists around that idea and why it works so well in region. Arvin, I'll let you jump in. I'd love to hear from you as well, because of course, you've been driving the BNPL piece as your business for so long. I'd love to hear what you think the benefits are, but specifically as well, I'm sure you get asked a lot what challenges there are and what people should be aware of.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think between Lala and Sonal, there's plenty of content on the benefits from a merchant standpoint. It's always great hearing that beyond some of the conversion metrics, we're also looking at engagement, because that's something that we talk about quite a bit now, especially in a post-shop back world where engagement and traffic is always a big topic. It's great to hear that that's a key area of consideration as well when it comes to the benefits. In terms of the challenges, I think it's something that we touched on really early in the conversation, which is that we operate in a part of the world that's very unique. It's a collection of countries that all behave and operate in very different ways, and local payment methods and the way we look at it is local repayment methods over the duration of a BNPL order tend to vary as well from a market by market basis. The way folks shop, the way they interact, the things that they buy, the sites that they use, the stores that they visit, all of these things are quite unique from a shopping behavior standpoint. And I think that's what's the key element for us, is to be more in line with that shopping behavior. Again, it's a a cheap plug, but being part of Shopback Group, it's a business that's built on the back of everything shopping related. It gives us a lot more insight and understanding into how shoppers behave, where they shop, and all of those other things that I just brought up, and allow us to implement a solution that is more fit for purpose on a market by market basis. So even as we launch a new market or think about new markets that we bring the solution into, using that experience and shopping behavior, of course, also a very engaged customer base when we launch a new market now, is really helpful. But that's probably one of the things that still remains a challenge. It is the unique element of this region in Southeast Asia, of really making sure that you've got that local aspect to a business as you get in there.
Definitely. Thank you for your insight. And Perry, I know you haven't necessarily got that space going with you at the moment. So I guess kind of what challenges do you foresee if you were to be going around implementing it? What things are you considering when talking about buy now, pay later in Ralali?
Yeah, I think what I've just like mentioned before. So some of the challenges that our customers are facing right now are just managing their workflow, because I think all of the business here in Indonesia are quite struggling for that, and especially in this kind of moment where the Idul Fitri season is also coming in. So I think most of the business, I mean, they need to like manage their cash flows really well, because they have to like pay their staff, or also how to keep their business afloat by doing business that they need to be doing. So I think to coming up with a BNPL product such as that we have right now is Rally Plus is also a good thing to do. Also to answer some of those problems. So I think and also we are also doing what we can say like KYB, or knowing your business, just to making sure that they're actually are what kind of business that they're running, and also how much people that they have in their business. So I think that kind of thing that is coming to a smaller business is something that we can provide. I think Sonal have mentioned that very clearly. So I think this kind of a feature that can help some of the small business to for us to be doing certain checks for them. So I think that's something that we can do.
Thank you. We've got a couple questions from the audience. If we can just address that one. The first one comes in from Carlene Phillips. Thank you. What are the common repayment challenges, and what are the strategies that can effectively improve the repayment rates? Arvin, I'd maybe jump to you and then go to Sonal, as you guys probably both have the most specific domain knowledge here, specifically with BNPL. What do you see kind of around this question and getting those repayment rates? I know, Arvin, you spoke more about actually not letting it slip into the days past. What would you like to suggest here?
No, that's a big part of it. I think when it comes to repayment, we automate everything around it so that customers don't really have to think about that next payment, other than the dates that we present at the checkout point and the reminders that we sent to them ahead of time. But the intent there is that there's no need to go in or log into something and execute another action down the road. 30 days from now, it's all automated, it's all seamless, it's the invisible payment, so to speak. But of course, there's that situation of where you get closer and closer to that due date, and we kind of ramp up the comms at that point, which I think is really important, because one of the biggest factors that we see on a non-payment is that the card is expired, or there's not enough balance on it because somebody's managing multiple debit cards and they need to transfer some funds over. And that little reminder just before the charge goes through is usually enough to spark that, oh, I need to go take care of this. So I think it comes back to communication being a key tenet as part of this flow, and building that into the product so that you've got that constant communication with the customer. It's actually a great touch point as well for us from an experience standpoint, to just show that responsible aspect. One of the things that we've talked about from the beginning of this business is responsible affordability, providing the ability for somebody to afford the product that they want, but doing so in a responsible way. And it means doing that proactive communication before that due date even hits.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. Sonal, are you seeing similar? Is India treating it differently?
No, absolutely. I think very similar to what Arvind was talking about, right? I think it's all, the idea is to make it as automated as possible, right? And from the date the consumer transacts to the date that he has to pay back as well, the due date, the difference between the due date and the final date, right, when you start levying the charges. I think the way we have also sort of worked around is ensuring that the reminders, and most of these reminders are automated and targeted, right? So for instance, we do understand, and again, we do have a platform which is Flipkart. So we are able to actually assess whether the consumer has forgotten to pay the bill or there's something else off, right? Because maybe he's coming, or he or she is coming back to the platform, right? So I think we've built in very smart integrations within the platform as well to basically ensure that we are able to send the reminders to the customer on platform and off platform at a time when we know that he'll be paying much more attention to the reminders. But at the end of the day, the idea is to ensure that it's as digital as possible. Absolutely no calls, your ability to deduct the amount directly from a consumer's card or a bank account. And that's the journey that we're heading towards.
Thank you. Perry, do you have anything you want to share on this question?
Yeah, I think this is actually something a bit like different with here in Reality.com, because I think for repayment, yeah, I think of course, as also Avi just mentioned, I think the automations I think need to be in places. I think for me as a CRM people, I think user journey is also something that's very, very pivotal for us to ensure that, you know, the repayment can be done in a better way. I think, you know, of those channels that we have, you know, such as push notice or WhatsApp Blast, which is pretty much huge here in Indonesia, also needs to be something that could be utilized in order to notify our users to, you know, pay in time. And also, I think what's the benefit of us here in Reality, that since that we are connected to the business ecosystem, and also that we're trying to ensure that all of the company that has been involved with our BNPL product, they can actually pay on time. And if it's not, we also have like this flexibility for them to pay like in a later than let's say more than 1 month, or they can actually pay like in 60 days or stuff like that. So yeah, so that's why that we are actually can, you know, give them some sort of like a flexibility to use this BNPL product again, as I was mentioning, just to manage their cash flow and also to keep their business afloat. Because again, this is a very different market that we actually want all of our business to thrive, you know, upon our platform. So that's kind of features that we actually need to provide. And again, something to innovate and also to support to our customers reach our business.
Thank you. Lala, I won't come to you with that question. I'll go to you to one of the questions that has come in specifically for you. For the Singapore market, can you share more about the DBS plans with MasterCard, Pine Labs with regards to BNPL plans, merchant or consumer focused?
So yeah, because we see BNPL as something that's really, really gaining popularity, right? And we want to be able to enable that checkout installment option at as many merchants, both online and offline, as possible. But one of the challenges is it's really difficult to go out and get merchants one by one, as Arvind can probably understand. The way we've chosen to address this is to partner with MasterCard and Pine Labs. We were the first regional issuer to do that. And what that allows DBS credit and debit card holders to do is to access that installment option whenever the merchant is connected to Pine Labs. So that could be a network where Pine Labs goes out to acquire all these merchants. And as long as you are a DBS card, then at the store or online, you can have access to that option, even though there's no direct DBS connectivity to that specific merchant. So that's our way of really broadening our coverage in the market.
Thank you. There was another question that came in. Sorry, they're coming from different places. And then we'll go back to our scheduled questions. Perhaps this actually goes to Sonal and Arvind specifically. It's another data point that someone's looking for, which is Do we observe any differences or on whether people are more open to BNPL amongst different generations? Are you seeing more of an uptake in different places, different age groups than you are anywhere else?
So, do you want to start?
Okay, I was just checking with you, but sure, let me give it a shot and take it. Yes, I mean, indeed we do, right? I think not just in I think consumer segments, not just in terms of different generations, right, but geographical barriers, the current state of employment. I mean, whether you're self-employed or maybe you're salaried. I think different cuts, if you apply to, you will see that there's of course a different adoption rate or a different adoption curve altogether among most of these segments, but just in a very generalist way. Of course, I mean, I think the younger generation, which is millennials, people up to 35, maybe at some time 40 years of age, we've usually seen a very high adoption of buy now, pay later. Primarily could also be because buy now, pay later started with online merchant, online experience first. And that was also the generation that was more comfortable with sort of, putting on trust on some of these platforms. And therefore, I think there's some part of that effect going on. So in credit, if you ask me, yes, there is a differential behavior in terms of generations. If I look at other digital ecosystem and primarily UPI in India, right, because it's just again scan and pay, but real-time transfer of money from your account or card, there I actually do not see any difference, right? So my hunch is it's got to do more with online penetration first, but not really with the generation. That's at least what I'm witnessing. Arvind, over to you.
No, it's interesting. Maybe just to contrast a bit and highlight that point that you made a bit more. There's a bit of selection bias, I think, is exactly what you were saying, to where we started, what channel it is, what type of merchants we work with. It really does create that effect itself, rather than saying that it might be more fit for a certain customer segment. So, my general view on that is that as we open up more merchants, more channels, more retail outlets, we do see a more diverse customer base start to use the solution as well. So I do think that some of the general assumptions that we've made in the past about the perfect user for a BNPL product, it has been tied to some of that bias, and now we're seeing it being a much broader base. We kind of use this term of everyday aspirations, which can be very, very different by the demographic groups as well, of what is an aspirational or an everyday aspirational product to get access to. So as we make those products available, we will definitely see a broader range of customers as well.
Sure. Thank you. I'll jump back to some of my questions that we had as we're getting close to the end. Perhaps I don't have anyone preferred to go to here, so anyone let me know who wants to answer this question. But what are some innovations that you're seeing on the horizon that you think will change the playing field for the incumbents? What are you seeing out there that's coming, or do you believe that BNPL is it, and it's going to change a lot out there? Does anybody have anything they want to share on this one? Just come off mute if you want to. No one? I'll pick on someone if they don't have anything. Lala, I know you're writing a response to one of the other questions that came in. Why don't I go to Perry? You've been quiet for a while. What innovations do you see on the horizon, Perry, for payments and things that are changing? Make that future prediction and we'll hold you to it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think as I've also mentioned, I think I think it's all about information, that what we want to share to our customers, right? I think it's all down to, what are their wants, what are their needs, and also things that we have to be doing in order to, to satisfy their needs, to fulfill what they want. I think for us here as a B2B e-commerce, I think I think in terms of BNPL itself, of course, we need to make sure that all the technology that is needed to inform our customers, to let them know what's are up to, need to be in place. I think all kinds of channels that we have, especially for me in a CRM sphere, everything needs to be done and also need to be created. All kinds of communication that we want to say, just like to emails, like or to SMS, to WhatsApp, which is like pretty much huge here in Indonesia, and I'm also pretty much sure, and also in India. So I think all that kind of technology that this also can be done, and also some of the options that we can also do. So let's say to extend the paying period or stuff that is catering to those business users, and also to those who work in a procurement in a corporate. I think that kind of options to do that is also something that can be done in order to innovate, and also I think for me as a customer relationship management, something that can innovate, something that can be fulfilled to our customers is something that I have to really pay very close attention to. Yeah.
Arvin, Sonal, Lala, anything you're seeing on the horizon without again giving away what you're working on? But if there's anything interesting you're seeing, I see Sonal, you come off mute.
No, I think, of course, Perry mentioned about, some of the ecosystem bets that of course are going to change, right? But I think one of the other key areas of interest in forms of tech development for us at least is, how do you actually underwrite the customer better when you do not have a lot of information on the customer? And I think as we continue to talk about, and taking a cue from what Arvind was saying, right? As we continue to expand buy now, pay later offerings and other credit offerings on top of this, right? How do you actually understand whether a customer is the right fit or not, right? Because the approach that so far I think the industry has taken is, do you want to give a credit or not, right? I think the approach that is now coming up is there a reason why you don't want to give credit? So I think we're moving from like a whitelist structure to a blacklist structure now. And I think that is where a lot of bandwidth, a lot of focus in terms of tech interruptions and interactions are going to go further, right? That's one focus area for sure. And I think the second one is also in terms of, how do you, I mean, it's commonly known as KYC process, and all of us have been doing that in different form and shape, right? But how do you literally do KYC process in 5 seconds? There are, again, I think to each country, it's going to be like a different performance parameter altogether. How long do you take to actually underwrite your customer and, get him to sign up? But I think that's another area where eventually we will see a lot of new bright innovations coming up, right? It could be like face recognition for all we know. But I think that's the way we are definitely headed.
Arvin, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, just maybe on the expectations of customers in the last couple of years being very digital, and the experience being very instant. I don't think that expectation is going to go away now that we're kind of shifting back to retail environments and things like that. So there is certainly an element of that immediate response, the immediate I guess experience overall end to end. I think it kind of touches what Sonal was saying as well, is in that there are elements that we have no choice but to do as part of the customer journey. But the winners from a technology standpoint are going to be the ones that allow us to do it in the most seamless, expedited manner as possible, while still maintaining a very high quality. The KYC example is a great one. It is something that we must do, but doing so on the right service provider is going to be one that differentiates based on that experience.
In interest of time, I'm going to combine the question that's come in. I think it kind of hits what we had left in our list to talk about today as well. We had a question coming in specifically around how BNPL works in countries that lack technological infrastructure to ensure collections and contact tracing for defaulters, which kind of links back to the question we had left, which was what ways do you use technology to support the business strategy of BNPL? So these two work together. What does anybody have anything they want to share here? Perhaps Lala, from a banking infrastructure perspective, if you have anything to share on this last one.
Yeah, I do think that in terms of these, although these countries may be developing, there are a lot, the population is quite mobile first, right? So a lot of the technology in terms of reaching out, in terms of WhatsApp, push notifications, they still do work quite well. At DBS, we actually use a combination of sort of AI scoring, credit scoring models at the time where the customer is onboarded to manage the way we do payment reminders in terms of the channel that we use, the type of messaging that we use, and how frequently we choose to send out these kind of collection reminder messages. That really helps before the payment becomes a missed one. There's also a lot of data out there that's available in terms of contact tracing from the bureau records. A lot of these buy now pay later providers are now actually on the bureau. There's a lot of address, phone number data that we can potentially leverage from our partners as well. I think the whole ecosystem is really banding together to solve this challenge.
Yeah, and I think that's key, is kind of realizing it's not necessarily competitive. It's really about the ecosystem kind of sharing best practices here as well.
Yeah.
Definitely. Does anybody else have anything to add on the technology piece? Okay, I might try and squeeze in one of the other questions that has come in. We've had a few come through. I think I'd like to take this one. So, is credit assessment of individual consumers important when giving credit facilities to new consumers? For BNPL, basically, will a more liberal credit policy attract unwanted high-risk customers? Arvin, you're smiling. Do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, it's the ultimate balance, right? Of putting in place technology that makes sense. And if you have the right mindset in terms of building a business for the long run, then you're not going to compromise on bringing in customers that you would otherwise not give access to a solution. So, a liberal credit policy, I think, isn't something that we've really talked about as a business. We look at how do we enhance the way that we make a decision about onboarding a customer and allowing them to purchase a specific product. And we make that decision around what the customer is buying, when they're buying, how well we know them as a user. It's a very different, I think, approach, and it's an assessment that happens even if we've known you for 2 years as a customer. We are going to still think about what you're doing and how you're doing it when you're doing it. And using, I think Perry brought up this point earlier around information or data or access to a view on that customer, really building something that's unique to us. That is, I will say, that is a large part of the secret sauce of what we do, is being able to bring in customers on a responsible way. And of course, over time, give them access to more usage with the solution as well. So yeah, it's that is going to be one of the key differentiation points in the long run of building a sustainable buy now pay later business.
So now, did you have anything to add to that? In that you touched a little bit on it earlier.
Yeah, I think, Arvind is right in the sense, I think we're just not moving to a more liberal policy. We're in fact moving to a much more intelligent and evolved structure of credit assessment, right? I think the way it has changed is that there are many more data points and touch points available on a customer. So you rely less on bureau, you rely more on where the consumer is, what is the consumer looking to make a purchase on, your relationship with the consumer, and a whole lot of other factors, right? So I think the way you evaluate customer has changed, right? In certain ways, it's become more intelligent and more surgical and more real time. So for instance, if I were to go onto a platform, say a Flipkart Pay Later, and apply for credit because I'm looking to buy a t-shirt, you will possibly just extend a credit line of 500 because you know my past purchase behavior, and that's how you also manage your exposure. But if I know that, it's Sonal, she's already sort of, she's been purchasing a new mobile phone every 6 months, you'll be like, hey, I know a lot more about this customer. As per my policy, she's eligible for like maybe a 10,000 Singapore dollars line, and here it is, right? So it'll go ahead and buy it. So I think we're moving to a much more elongated structure in the way we assess customers real time than what we were obviously doing before, when some of these infrastructures were not available, right? And so I actually see that we'll become much more smarter, but not liberal.
Thank you, Sonal. And thank you, everybody, for joining today. We've heard a lot from Arvin, Perry, Sonal, and Lala. Thank you so much for all your insight and time today. Thank you for sharing with the audience. And thank you, and sorry to the audience whose questions we weren't able to get to today, but thank you for engaging with us as much as you did. Raymond?
Perfect. Thanks so much. And also our moderator, our panelists as well, Lala, Sonal, Arvin, and Perry, for such an engaging discussion. And also thank you to everyone for your participation and sharing your questions as well. I hope that you have found this session interesting and have some useful takeaway as well. As shown in your screen, we will have some upcoming webinars happening in the afternoon on the 10th of May. and 12th of July. And on top of that, we also have 2 key events coming up, which is our Seamless Australia and Seamless event taking place in May and June respectively. So please feel free to scan your QR code on the screen to register and secure your free seat now. And thank you once again to everyone, and hope to see you next time. Have a good day and great evening.
So much.